Fans have thought about what really happened between George Strait and Alan Jackson, two of the biggest names in country music. They were either close friends or quiet enemies, but it was likely a lot more than that. Strait isn't holding back. At age 73, and what he just said is making waves in the country music world. It wasn't long ago that George Harvey Strait was just a quiet Texas boy with a heart full of music and a story that no one saw coming. His platinum songs sold out stadiums, and he was called the King of Country. George was born on May 18, 1952, in Patit, Texas, a place so small that it doesn't even show up on the map. He grew up far away from the fame and lights of Nashville and Los Angeles. His dad owned a 2,000-acre cattle ranch close by in Pearsall, where he grew up. It was easy, tough, and honest. John Strait was his father. He taught math in junior high school and ran a ranch. A man who believed in hard work, being polite, and putting your head down. And maybe that's where George learned the theory he lives. Speak little, sing loud, and let the music speak for you. And here's something most people don't know. George didn't always want to make country songs. He was in a garage rock band in high school. Something clicked for him when he joined the U.S. Army and was sent to Hawaii. The first time he played country music was there with a band called Rambling Country. That's where the cowboy was born, far from home and in the middle of military life. Still, it wasn't easy for him to get back home early. When he got out of the Army in the mid-1970s, George went back to Texas with just a dream, a guitar, and not many people he knew. He went to Southwest Texas State University, which is now called Texas State University, and studied farming. But the music kept coming. He started playing with a small neighborhood band called Stony Ridge. Eventually, he changed the name of the band to the Ace in the Hole Band. He played in small honky-tonks in Dusty, bars all over South Texas every week. Small settings and crowds didn't bother George because his voice was strong enough to stand out. It asked for one. They were still not interested in Nashville. Record labels turned down demo after demo after demo, over and over again. People told him that his sound was too classic or old-fashioned and wouldn't sell. Pop country music was becoming more popular at the time. George's style didn't fit in. Then the surprise that no one saw coming. MCA Records gave him a chance with one song in 1981, thanks to some luck and a lot of hard work. A test. That tune? Open Up. It wasn't just a hit. It came from a gun. There was no stopping Unwound on the radio, and it went straight into the top 10. Nashville couldn't ignore the man with the shy smile and the old-fashioned voice. All of a sudden, momentum. For the next 60 years, he had over 60 number-one hits, dozens of albums, and an unbreakable hold on the genre he loved. In spite of his fame, George never changed. He didn't let anyone know about his personal life. He didn't do interviews very often. Unlike many of his friends, he also stayed out of trouble and gossip. But that silence would finally lead to questions, especially about his connections in the business. Alan Jackson kept coming up when he talked about his relationships. In the same genre, there are two huge names, two guys with similar values, musical tastes, and traditional styles. But while some fans loved their duets and shared stage moments, others felt like they were not as close. Why didn't they go on more tours together? Why aren't there more group interviews? Was there quiet kindness or quiet competition? For some reason, George Strait kept quiet, so the solutions took a while to come. Up until now. At age 73, George has finally chosen to let his guard down. He won't do it with drama or showmanship, but with the calm, honest truth that has been his life's theme. It's both touching and surprising what he has said about his long and complicated relationship with Alan Jackson. We need to go back to the early 1990s, though, to fully understand what it meant. That's when their public paths first crossed. Real country music was being pushed by both guys at a time when the genre was changing. While other artists mixed rock and pop styles, George and Alan stuck to what they knew. They liked steel guitars more than synths and songs with stories over catchy hooks. That set them apart and made them friends. But when consumers are similar and the business world changes, even small partnerships can feel like rivalries. Still, there was respect between them that never changed. A radio interview in 2018 showed that George told a close friend, "Alan is the kind of guy I would tip my hat to, even when no one is watching." Fans later learned that quote meant more than they thought, especially when they thought about what happened behind the scenes, like how George reportedly dropped out of a big award nomination to make room for Alan, or how both men quietly pushed for the return of traditional sounds to the Country Music Association's annual awards when pop music took over the genre. They always fought together, but sometimes they were separate. Fans don't see these private moments, but they show the real truth about their friendship. In all honesty, George Strait not only liked Alan Jackson, he looked up to him. The next part of George's journey, how he dealt with personal disaster, stayed true to his roots, and kept his crown without ever trying to get it, is what really makes him a person. This part of his story is where all of what he said about Alan Jackson will finally make sense. George Strait's work was going great in the 1980s and 1990s, but not many people knew how much pain he was feeling behind the scenes. Even though George was calm and country chic in public, he had been hurt in love before. Jennifer Strait, his 13-year-old daughter, died in a car accident in San Marcos, Texas. In 1986, it was a terrible loss that George rarely talked about in public. He decided to be quiet instead of showy, and he stopped going on media tours and doing interviews. While the country music community came together to support George, he dealt with his sadness in his own way, through music and family. Losing that person made him feel terrible, and it changed his whole life. He did not fall or take a step back. Instead, he moved forward with more conviction, not because of popularity, but because of his faith and the memory of his daughter. He started the Jennifer Strait Memorial Foundation in secret. It helps Texas children's causes, but he didn't tell many people about it. In many ways, that was what George Strait was all about, doing the right thing without expecting praise. He changed how he thought about the business, his fans, and other artists after this terrible loss. While others were after news stories, George was interested in what really mattered. He stayed away from controversy, fights, and the other things that usually happen around country stars to get attention. His unique style set him apart and helped him build one of the most prestigious names in modern music. As the 2000s came around, George didn't follow fashion trends in his work. He didn't change how he looked to appeal to younger people or switch to crossover sounds. Instead, he played more classic country music. Many directors told him to update, but he politely refused. He wasn't here to ride waves. He held things together. The next group of artists looked up to him because he was a quiet leader. The one who spoke out the most was Alan Jackson. Alan had always said that George Strait was one of the people who influenced him the most. He talked about George as a true north for country music and a symbol of honesty and integrity in many talks over the years. Even though they didn't tour together or work together much, their careers were very similar. They were both from the South and had humble beginnings. They were both traditionalists in a field that was always changing, and they were both very committed to country's roots. Even though they didn't talk about their relationship much, it became clearer in the late 2000s. Fans started to notice times when respect was shown without words at award shows. Alan nodded from the crowd as George played, and George tipped his hat as Alan took the award. They weren't flashy moves, but for real country fans, they meant the world. The mutual respect grew even stronger during George Strait's final tour, The Cowboy Rides Away, in 2014. Alan Jackson played with George at his last show in Arlington, Texas, in front of more than 100,000 people. It was the most attended indoor concert in U.S. history. They shared the stage for Amarillo by Morning. Not only was it a duet, but it was also a tribute, a quiet nod to decades of working together. But even then, George didn't say much in public about how they were dating. People paid attention when he finally spoke after many years. In early 2025, George Strait, who is now 73 years old, was asked about the state of country music, and the artists he thought best reflected it on a Texas-based country radio station. He took a break. Next, George did what he always does and gave a simple, sincere answer. I've always had a lot of respect for Alan. He stood tall when everyone else in the business wanted us to bend. We talked a little, but we knew what each other meant. It's not often that people are that faithful. As if taken off guard, the host pressed further, asking if there had ever been tension between the two of them. George smiled and said, "Don't worry. Two guys in different lanes doing the same thing." I've always liked that he never gave in. That meant more to me than anything we said. Fans went crazy over that short comment. Many ideas had been thrown around about the silence between them for years. Everything made sense. It wasn't a competition. Honor was the word. Strait's quiet respect for Alan Jackson was a reflection of the ideals he lived by throughout his career: honesty, reliability, and a clear goal without acting fake. It wasn't about big partnerships or trying to get attention. It was about being real. Meanwhile, Alan Jackson was touched by George's words. Jackson has recently been having health problems because of Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a degenerative nerve disease. Close friends say that Alan called George after the show played. It had been years since they had talked for a long time. That talk is still private, but since then, there's been a closeness that fans hadn't seen before. After a few weeks, George, who doesn't normally post on social media, shared a simple picture. There are two cowboy hats on a studio nightstand. No picture, just understanding for each other. As both men's jobs come to an end, their story, which used to be mysterious, is now shaped by respect for each other. That truth is more important to fans than any fantasy ever could be. The country king and the tall, quiet criminal didn't have to make a big deal out of their relationship. They had to live it. Fans finally know what many had always hoped was true now that the truth is out. George Strait and Alan Jackson weren't very far away. They were poles that held up the same house of country music from different ends and wouldn't let it fall. Together, George Strait and Alan Jackson sold more than 150 million records and had more than 100 number-one hits. They not only ruled country music, they set the standards for it. They made the rules for how a country should work. When stayed true to its roots, even as the rest of the industry moved toward commercialism and crossover success. They still have an impact today, and it goes beyond charts and awards. New country music is built on that. And as new artists get bigger, a lot of them still compare themselves to the quiet standards set by Strait and Jackson. This is true whether they stick to traditional styles or mix them with other styles. Their hard work, good reputations, and unwillingness to follow trends have made them the best in their field. For many people who want to be country singers, success doesn't just mean getting a hit. It means being looked up to like George. It means being strong like Alan. This effect can be seen most clearly in the stars of today. Luke Combs often plays songs by both artists in his live shows. He has said in public, "If you don't recognize what George and Alan built, they made it okay to be proud of your accent, your roots, and your story." Combs, whose neo-traditional style gets a lot of praise, sees them as his model. In the same way, John Party, who is also a strong supporter of classic country music, says that their work helped him develop his own sound. They didn't shout about what they believed in. They just kept coming back year after year and helped us remember where we came from. Even artists like Chris Stapleton and Cody Johnson, who have taken the genre in new ways, say that they were important to them growing up. The question for them is not whether George Strait or Alan Jackson was well known, but whether they were real. In a time when being real is valuable, Strait and Jackson's accomplishments have never been more important.